What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, and I'm here once again for another comprehensive preview for all the NBA player props on this upcoming slate. I'll be going through all your key players, talking through their form lines, looking at their matchups. If it's good, I'm going to call it out. If it's not, I'm going to let you know as well. Bit of an FYI, I won't be previewing the Hawks v Rockets, Cavs v Raptors, and the Pelicans versus Blazers, as lines aren't available for them yet, but still a lot of games to get through. As always, I'll be sharing my screen. If you're interested in taking your betting experience to the next level, you can check out outlier.bet. I've got a 7-day free trial. Links in the description box below. Let's go. We're jumping straight in with the Oklahoma City Thunder versus the Dallas Mavericks. Now let's kick it off with Luka Doncic. Let's see what's on the board today. Looking at his points line, the line set at 32.5. Thank God we're starting to see some normal lines because those lines are 38 points. Absolutely crazy. Now we can see Luka in his last 10. He's covered this line in 8 of his last 10 games. Oklahoma, they allow the 10th most points to point guards on the season. So that works out in our favor. Looking at head-to-head matchups, he's gone over this line in his last 2 games against them, 31 in the game prior. So 30 points, looking quite safe to me. But this line of 32.5 for Luka Doncic, I like it already. Now, I'd like to see who's in and who's out. But quick look at some injuries. Injury report, Gordon Hayward just traded to the Thunder. He's out. Luka's a game-time decision. Exum is out. Gafford's a game-time decision. Kyrie's a game-time decision. And Maxi Kleber is a game-time decision as well. So hopefully Luka does play. And if he does play and you get this line at 32.5, I'll eat that shit up because it's looking pretty good to me. He's done it well against OKC Thunder recently. In his last 10 games, absolutely electric scoring the ball. So 32.5. If it stays at that way, lines have just opened up. I think a lot of people are going to eat that up. So I think that line's going to move, provided that Luka plays. Looking at his assists, line set at 9.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. The OKC, they give up the 7th most assists to point guards on the season. So that's looking pretty good. In head-to-head matchups, he had 18 assists in his last game against the Oklahoma City Thunder, 8 and 10 prior to that. Looking at his rebound prop, we can see he's rebounded very well against OKC, 16, 11, and 15. His line set at 9.5. Looking at his last 10 games, though, he's only covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. Given the reduced points line, what I'd be thinking is probably a PRA for Luka. Line's at 52.5, and he's covered that in 8 of his last 10 games. Last 2 games against OKC, 69, 57, 57. So he's covered this in 3 straight games against OKC. This is definitely the way that I'd be leaning because as we can see here, all green. Points allowed, rebounds allowed, and assists allowed to point guards. OKC has been giving it up. So Luka, don't mind his lines in this one. The next player we're going to jump through is Kyrie Irving. My man be swerving. And he's a game time decision as well. But let's have a look to see what we're working with. His points line's at 24.5. He's only hit this in 6 of his last 10, but only in 1 of his last 5. Hasn't versed the Oklahoma City Thunder as a member of the Dallas Mavericks. But looking at the matchup, OKC giving it up. 5th most points to shooting guards this season. So the matchup is good, but Kyrie hasn't been playing that great. He's been getting the minutes, 30-plus minutes in every game. He's been taking a decent number of shots, but he doesn't take many free throws. He's shooting a pretty all right percentage from downtown as well, but on pure volume alone, he's not making it happen. So, not loving the points line there for Kyrie, but I'm not saying to take the under. Assists, OKC gives up a lot of assists to shooting guards. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. Line at 5.5. Yeah, once again, look, I think for Kyrie, there's nothing screaming out to me. Obviously, if Luka is out, then definitely a Kyrie prop is on. Whether you take his points or assists, he's going to get a lot of opportunity to get both. But yeah, definitely liking Luka better than Kyrie at this point in time. And since we've got in early, we can have a look at Josh Green. I've seen a lot of people have been backing Josh Green lately, especially since he's joined the starting lineup. And you can see why. So his line's at 9.5. He's covered this in 5 consecutive games so far. Looking at his minutes, he's playing over 30 minutes in each one. The down games he's had, Phoenix and Orlando. That Orlando game, he played quite a bit. But looking at his shot attempts, his last 5 games, he's been putting it up a lot more. The 2 games he went under, he went 1 from 6 against the Magic and 3 for 8 against the Phoenix Suns. Outside of that, he's covered this line easily. Looking at small forwards, difficult matchup according to this. The OKC Thunder allow the second fewest points to small forwards. But Josh Green, a lot of what he's going to be scoring is catch and shoot. So I'd be interested to see what his 3-point line looks like. Line's at 1.5. You can get that for -110. And he's covered that in 9 of his last 10 games. The Thunder allow the 8th fewest 3-pointers made to small forwards on the season. But looking at his attempts, he's been putting them up. So we're seeing lows of 3, highs of 8. So he's going to get his opportunities. Don't mind him to make them. He's shooting them at 46%. So if he takes 5 to 6 3-pointers, he's most likely going to cash these too. So I don't mind that for Josh Green as a single play. Luke is going to find him. Matchup might be a little bit difficult. Looking at how he's performed against him in the past, 0 for 2. That match was in 2022 though, so I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Having a look at some of these boys from the OKC. Let's check out SGA first. Points line, he's at 31.5, which appears low based off what I've seen so far this year. Points allowed to point guards. Dallas allow 11th fewest points to point guards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games, so usually a lock for 30. Been a little bit quiet as of late. Head-to-head matchups against the Dallas Mavericks, though. Scored 17 in their most recent matchup in December. And prior to that, he was killing them. So 3 games in the over, 17 in their last matchup. In that game, let's have a look. He only took 13 shot attempts, which is quite low for him. And the insight from Outlier is SGA's failed to exceed 31.5 points in 7 of his last 9 road games. So let's check that out. SGA, let's have a look at SGA on the road. And we can see, yeah. So he's only covered this in 3 of his last 10 road games, which is a very interesting insight. Let's have a look at his assists. Looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. 3 straight, he's covered this line of 6.5. The odds for that are at -139 though, so fair bit of juice happening there. In head-to-head matchups, he had 9 assists in that last game against Dallas, 5, 3, and 9 prior to that. So no real strong reads. The matchup, Dallas is mid-14th in terms of assists allowed to point guards. If we have a look at how he's performing on the road, last 10 road games for SGA, he's covered this in 3 of his last 10. So assists aren't screaming out to me either. Let's have a quick look at his rebounds. In his last 10, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. Matchup-wise, Dallas, quite a good matchup, giving up the 8th most rebounds to point guards. How he's rebounded against Dallas in the past, he's gone under in 3 straight. Looking at his last 10 road games, he's only covered in 3 of his last 10. So nothing screaming out to me there for SGA. Let me know in the comment section if SGA is screaming out for you, but I'm not feeling it. So this is his PRA line. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. So the lines appear to be pretty much spot on. And SGA can be difficult to bet on sometimes. I think you're probably best just taking him for 25 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds perhaps. But yeah, I'm not feeling it. Definitely Luka, my favorite play from this game so far. Let's check out Chet Holmgren. Points-wise, his line's at 16.5. The Mavericks allowed the 11th fewest points to centers. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. In head-to-head matchups, played the Dallas Mavericks once. He scored 11 points. Looking at his last 10 road games, he's covered this in 5 of his last 10 as well. So Chet, points, not screaming out to me. Looking at his assists, though, we can see his line's at 2.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. He's hit this in 4 consecutive games. Last matchup against the Mavs, he had 3 assists, so he did cover this line. And if we have a look at how he performs on the road, he's covered in 6 of his last 10 games. So in terms of assists allowed, though, the Mavs allow the 7th fewest assists to centers. So that's not looking great. Rebound, surely that's a good matchup. Okay, 12th. The Mavericks allow the 12th most rebounds to centers. Looking at his last 10 games, he's hit this in 5 of his last 10. First matchup in his career against Dallas, he had 11 rebounds. So, yeah, nothing screaming out to me for Chet either. And look, OKC haven't been playing great lately, and a lot of their players haven't necessarily been outperforming the lines that have been put up. And I think that's because they've been playing so well throughout the year. It's really become difficult because their lines get higher and higher as they continue to improve. They're in a flat spot right now. So a lot of the form you're going to see isn't going to be great. Let's have a look at J-Dub, Jalen Williams. Line's at 19.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. So that's nice and positive. Looking to see the Mavericks allow the 3rd most points to power forwards. So the matchup is good. His recent form looks decent. And in his last game against Dallas, this is the main one that matters, I would say, because this was this season. All the others were last season. He scored 23 points. So Jalen Williams to score some points. He's got good form. He's done it against Dallas this year. And his last 10 is pretty decent. He's been covering this line quite well. So I don't mind that. Jalen Williams for points. Let's check out his assist prop. Line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. In his matchup, he's good. Mavs allow the 6th most assists to power forwards. Last game against Dallas, he had 5 assists. So, yeah, it's not screaming out to me the way his points are, but it's not bad whatsoever. Rebound-wise, Dallas are mid in terms of the matchup. He had 5 rebounds against Dallas last time. And in his last 10 games, he's covered his rebound line 3 out of the 10 games. So, yeah, definitely leaning on the point side of things for Jalen Williams here. It's looking good. I want to just quickly check his road games. Last 10 road games, he's covered in 7 of his last 10. So even that looks pretty good. So I don't mind that whatsoever for Jalen Williams. Let's have a look at Josh Giddey, the man from down under. His points line's at 11.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games. In terms of matchup, it's a pretty positive one under the Dallas Mavericks, allowing the 9th most points to shooting guards. But 4 of his last 10. I know his minutes are a little bit wild. Check that out. That's his minutes. Averaging about 25, but can play up to 40, can play less than 20. So that can be a little bit difficult to bet on when it comes to Josh Giddey. Shot attempts, he does take a few, but yeah, that's not screaming out to me. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10. Had only 1 assist against Dallas last time. Rebound-wise, he had 3 rebounds in that last matchup against Dallas. Last 10 games, he's rebounded. He's covered this line in 4 of his last 10. So the matchup is pretty good, though. Dallas allowing a lot of rebounds to shooting guards. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Giddey get involved there. But look, just you don't know how much time he's going to get. He's quite inconsistent, can be ultra productive, and at times not productive at all. So I'm going to put Josh Giddey on pause, and let's jump into the next game. It's a Detroit Pistons versus the Los Angeles Clippers. So having a quick look at James Harden. Let's start there. Let's talk through the injuries in this game. Cade Cunningham, he's a game time decision. Flynn, Fournier, Quentin Grimes, they're still out. Who do we have? Isaiah Stewart's still out. I saw Thompson's game time, Shake Milton's game time as well. So Pistons looking quite light. No news on any Los Angeles Clippers players here. So positive signs if you're a Clips fan. But let's have a look at this. James Harden's points line. He's at 17.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10 games. The Detroit Pistons allow the 6th most points to point guards. Head-to-head matchups, James Harden, they only played each other, 7 days ago, a week ago? James Harden only scored 4 points in that game. I think there's a good chance for a bounce back, though. He played 33 minutes. He shot 1 from 10 from the field. So I wouldn't discount this. I'd say that, James Harden been getting after it lately. You can see that shocking game he had against the Pistons on the road, but I think there's a good chance that he can bounce back. In terms of his assists, his line's at 8.5. The Pistons allow the 11th most assists to point guards. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. 6 assists in that last game against Detroit. You can see that here. Looking at his rebounds, his line is at 5.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. Last matchup against the Pistons, he had 3 rebounds. So he didn't do too much in the 31 minutes that he played. But outside of that game, his rebounding form's not too bad. Assists, wildly inconsistent. And points-wise, he's starting to turn it on more recently. But I think there's going to be better players on the board than James Harden. Let's have a look at Zubac. So his points line's at 10.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. The Pistons allow the 8th most points to centers on the season. That last matchup against the Pistons, Zubac didn't play. So his last matchup against the Pistons was in 2022. He scored 12 points. So that's not too bad, but I think there could be better out there. Let's have a look at his rebounds prop. His line's at 8.5, but you can get that for plus money. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games. But the Pistons allow the 11th fewest rebounds to centers in the season. So his matchup against Duran, it's not the easiest one, I would say, statistically, but Zubac is the bigger man. But yeah, I'm not loving his props. Let's have a look at the claw, Kawhi Leonard. His line is at 25.5. He scored 33 points the last time they versed Detroit. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games. The Detroit Pistons allow the 9th most points to power forwards and the 5th most points to small forwards. So the wings for the Clippers, good chance to eat in this one. So Leonard's done it before, but that game was a lot closer than you thought it would be. They ended up winning by 11. Kawhi had to put some work in. He only scored 15 points against the Pelicans. Last time he had a down game like that was against the Raptors. Came back and scored 26 against the Celtics. Looking at his assists, his line for this is at 4.5, which feels very high. Now, look, Pistons allow the 12th fewest assists to power forwards, but they allow the 9th most assists to small forwards. Matchup wise, I would say it isn't too bad, but Kawhi's only covered this 4.5 in 2 of his last 10 games, and he only had 3 assists against the Detroit Pistons last time, so that's quite interesting. Rebound wise, his line's at 5.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. He only had 4 rebounds against the Pistons last time, though, and the Pistons allow the 15th most rebounds in the competition. So I think there's probably going to be a lot more value on the Pistons side of things, whereas these Clippers lines might be a little bit high. They're favorites, expected to play well and do better. But let's take a look. Cade Cunningham, his points line, if he does play, that is at 22.5. He's only covered that once since he's come back from injury, and that was his most recent game against the Portland Trail Blazers, where he did have a good matchup. Up against the Clippers, they allow the 15th most points to point guard, so the matchup's not too bad. He scored 16 points when they last match up. And looking at his assists, his line is at 6.5, so that doesn't move. It tends to stay at 6.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10, though, and he had 11 assists the last time he matched up with them. Clippers allow the 8th fewest assists to point guards, though, but the Pistons, they really performed well. They scored 125 points in that last game against the Clippers, but they're now on the road. So interested to see how he performs on the road. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 road games. Okay. Looking at Cade Cunningham's rebounds, his line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games. Looking at he had 3 rebounds against the Clippers. So he went under in that one. So, yeah, I'm not a fan of Cade Cunningham's rebound prop, that's for sure. Even his rebounds and his points, I'd probably take the under if I was to combine them both, because that points line seems a little bit too high for me. Let me just take a look at that. Points and rebounds for Cade Cunningham. Where's he sitting? The line's at 26.5 for his points and rebounds. He's gone under. Since he's come back from injury, he's yet to cover this line. So he's gone under in 6 consecutive games. Well, really just 5, because he got injured in this game against Denver. But yeah, he's gone under in 5 straight. In terms of the position, rebounds and points, late Clippers, they're in the bottom 10, allowing both. So yeah, under in Cade Cunningham's points and rebounds prop. That's not bad at all. Let's take a look at Jalen Duren in this one. His point line's at 15.5. Clippers allow the fewest points to centers over the season. It's a difficult matchup for him. He only scored 11 points when he versed the Clippers last time. He has been quite strong as of late. 27 against Portland, 20 against the Spurs, but very much easier opposition than he's going to be facing today. So looking at his head-to-head matchups, he's gone under this line in 3 straight games against the Clippers. So, yeah, look, at first glance, that does appear to be quite high to me. But looking at his rebound prop, we know this man can pull him down. He's covered this in, his line's 11.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. He had 13 rebounds against the Clippers last time. The Clippers do allow the 3rd fewest rebounds to centers, but the pace in this last game was wild. So at the moment, I wouldn't take his rebound prop despite the form. I would strongly consider leaning the under for Jalen Duren's points prop. But as always, check the pinned comment. The pinned comment at the bottom of this video is going to have all my final bets in it. And for the games that I'm not previewing, when lines do become available and I do make a play on them, I'll be putting them in the comment section as well. Let's have a look at Jaden Ivey. I've won a few bets on Jaden Ivey quite recently. He's been playing quite well. His points line is at 21.5. So we see that lifted. Bogdanovic has obviously been traded, so more scoring opportunities now for Jaden Ivey and even for Jalen Duren. He's covered this in 2 straight games, 37 against the Kings, 26 against the Portland Trail Blazers. Last matchup against the Clippers, Jaden Ivey scored 28 points. So if there is a weak link in the Clippers defense, it is guarding wings, 2s and 3s. They do allow the 14th most points to shooting guards on the season. And Jaden Ivey, just having a look, his minutes, crazy. 48 minutes against the Blazers, 38, but he's pretty much averaging 33 minutes over his last 10. In terms of field goal attempts, his last 2 games, he shot the ball more than 20 times. So what I'd be interested to see is what happens with and without Cade. So this is without Cade Cunningham. He obviously scored 37 against the Kings. Hit this line in 4 of his last 10 games. Without Cade Cunningham, with Cade in the lineup, he's covered this line in 2 of his last 10 games. But his more recent ones is what we're worried about. So that last game against the Clippers, Cade played, and Jaden Ivey still got some buckets happening. So not overly worried about whether Cade plays or not. But let's have a look at his assist prop real quick. His line's at 4.5. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10 games. He had 3 assists in that last matchup against the Clippers, who give up the 13th fewest assists to shooting guards on the season. Looking at his rebound prop, line's at 3.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. He did have 7 rebounds against the Clippers, who allow the 14th fewest rebounds to shooting guards. So I feel like the lines for Jaden Ivey are just about right. Nothing out there getting me aroused. So let's get on to the next one. And we're going to look at Paul George, PG. So the Pistons allow the 5th most points to small forwards. His line's at 21.5, but he's gone under this line in 9 consecutive games. The last time he versed the Pistons, he only scored 18 points. So Paul George, maybe he plays a lot better at home. Let's quickly check that. His last 10 games at home, Paul George is covered in 6 of his last 10. But the last time he covered was on the 17th of January. So we're looking at about 2 to 3 weeks ago. And he's been struggling ever since. So let's have a quick deep dive into his struggles to figure out what's happening here. Let me remove this. Let's look at his last 10 games. So his minutes are down. He's playing 29.9 minutes. Normally you'd expect 30 to 35. In terms of field goal attempts, he's not shooting the ball that much. And when he does shoot them, he's not shooting quite well. He's shooting at 42% from the field, 34% from 3, and he's only attempting 3 free throws per game. So yeah, he's having a difficult time at the moment. The matchup is good for him to explode. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go over, but this recent trend for Paul George is awful. He's been going under quite a lot. Let's check his other prop lines to see if maybe he's contributing in other areas. So this, I've actually won a few bets on Paul George's assists. This is a very recent thing of his. He's not shooting the ball much, but he's creating a lot more in offense. His line at 2.5, but that's at minus 160. You'd probably be better off at taking it over, over 3.5, and you get plus money for it. So looking at his line at over 3.5, these more recent games have been pretty impressive. 7 assists his last matchup against the Detroit Pistons. Even though he didn't score very well, the assists are definitely there. The Pistons allow the 9th most assists to small forwards on the season. So if you like recent form, like last 5 games type of shit, Paul George assists is definitely there. Points are not. Let's have a quick look at his rebounds. His line for that is at 4.5, but that's also a plus money. He's at that in 6 of his last 10. Pistons allow the 13th most rebounds to small forwards. So, yeah, that doesn't get me going at all. I think my thoughts on Paul George, good odds to get his assists. Even if you take the 2.5, you can add that for a parlay. It's not too bad at all. I'd feel confident in that. Points-wise, I'd be definitely leaning the under for PG. We're jumping into the San Antonio Spurs versus the Brooklyn Nets. The first player to look through is Victor Wembanyama. Let's see what big man's doing. But before we get to Wemby, let's talk about some injuries and lineup changes. No one major for the Spurs is missing. For the Nets, Cam Johnson is out. Lonnie Walker's a game-time decision. So let's have a look at Wemby. His point line's at 22.5. Nets, though, allow the 3rd fewest points to centers on the season. Nick Claxton, baby. Now, Wemby's gone under this line in 6 consecutive games. He's yet to verse the Brooklyn Nets just yet, but the last 6 games he's gone under. Let's do a little bit of a deep dive on that. We can see his minutes have been trending downwards, averaging 28 minutes over his last 10 games. In terms of shot attempts, they've been trending down as well. He's been shooting okay from the field, 47%, 33% from deep. But yeah, he's just trending down in his minutes and his opportunities at the moment. So I don't know what the thought process is around that. Is he hitting a rookie wall? Is it Popovich deciding to play him less? He has had a day's rest, so he's not on a back-to-back today. But last time he had ample rest, he still only put 18 points against the Miami Heat. So first glance, I'm thinking under for Victor's points line. 15 points you could take for your parlays because he's hit that in 10 straight, but you probably wouldn't get great odds for that. Let's have a look at his assist prop real quick. His line for his assists has gone up. It's 3.5, but you can get that for plus money. The Nets allow the 11th fewest assists to centers on the season. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10. So at these odds, Wemby assists, I'm not too keen on that at all. Looking at his rebounds, the Nets allow the 8th fewest rebounds to centers on the season. His line is at 10.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. The Magic is one of the most difficult matchups you possibly could get. We might see a bounce back here for Victor Wembanyama, but yeah, I'm not loving this single prop line. If I'm looking at 8 for a parlay, perhaps, but yeah, I'm not feeling Victor in this one in this matchup. Jumping into Devin Vassell, his point sign's at 21.5, and check out the greens on this. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10 games. The Nets allow the 13th fewest points to shooting guards, though. In his head-to-head matchups, last matchup with the Nets, he scored 14 points. So his recent form is great, though, so I won't dismiss that. Matchup is somewhat difficult. Hasn't got it off against him in the past. But looking at his activity, he's got great minutes, 35 minutes per game. He's attempting 16.8 shot attempts per game, and he's shooting them at a 51% clip. So the volume is definitely going to be there. I just want to check that last head-to-head matchup. You can see he only attempted 13 shots in his last game against the Brooklyn Nets, and he only played 25 minutes. So I wouldn't say that he struggled. He shot 38% from the field, which isn't great. 3 from 7 from deep, though. So struggled towards the rim. Based on the fact that he's playing a lot more minutes, we're looking at 35 minutes per game, and he's taking about 18 shots per game. I think the line is honestly about right. 15 points, I reckon he'll clear for sure, but on the fence on whether he can cover this 21.5. Looking at his assist prop, the line's at 4.5. He's gone under this in 6 straight games. This graph actually looks quite similar to Wemby's points graph. But yeah, 3 out of his last 10 he's covered. In terms of his matchup, the Nets allow the 12th fewest assists to shooting guards. His last matchup against the Nets, he had 3 assists, but obviously that was only in 25 minutes. Having a look at my man Jeremy Sohan, I just want to look at his rebounds prop because that's all I would say he's probably most reliable on. But looking at this graph, he clearly is not. In terms of matchup, the Nets allow the 12th fewest rebounds to power forwards, and he's only covered this line in 5 of his last 10. So big mistake. Apologies if I wasted your time by looking at Jeremy in this one. Last player for the Nets that I think is worth a look is Trey Jones. We'll check out his points and his assists in this one. I know that the Brooklyn Nets don't defend point guards quite well. They allow the 4th most points in the league to point guards. Now, Trey Jones has covered this line in 4 of his last 10 games, looking at 11.5. Last matchup against the Brooklyn Nets, he did score 13 points, and the Spurs won that game. So I'm not hating this. Line at 11.5, you can probably take it for 10 points for a multi. Just let me have a look at his minutes, though. He's playing 30 minutes per game over his last 10. He's averaging 8.8 shot attempts. So the volume probably isn't there. It's not strong enough for me to want to take, to be honest, but I don't mind that. The matchup is good. He's done it before, and he's been hovering around this line. So hopefully the good matchup might be something that you can take him over. Looking at his assist, line is at 6.5. The Nets allow the 7th fewest assists to point guards, though. But he has hit 6+ assists in 10 consecutive games. His line set at 6.5 for this one. Last matchup against the Nets, he had 5 assists. So that's a little bit worrisome, but yeah, that's Trey Jones. Jumping into some Brooklyn Nets players, Ben Simmons, just come back from injury. He's played a few games now. It's probably where the value's at because I don't know where the lines should be. His points line is at 5.5. Ben Simmons will be playing power forward, I believe, in this one. And the San Antonio Spurs, they allow the 14th most points to power forwards, which is pretty much middle of the league. He has covered this. He's been back from injury for 4 games now. Scored 10 points, no points, and he's covered this line in the other 2. So we're only asking for 6 points, which is great, which is you really need 3 layups because you're probably not going to count on him making his free throws. It'll be a very sweaty bet because looking at his work, he's only playing about 18 minutes per game since he's come back from injury. In terms of field goal attempts, he's taken 5, which he went 5 for 5, took none against Philly, made 4 from 7 against Dallas, and then he made 3 from 4 against the Brooklyn Nets. So you're going to need him to shoot a very high percentage if he's going to cover this 6-point line. Looking at his assists, so he's only on there for limited minutes. These are his 4 games, 11, 5, 7, and 2. In terms of his matchup, the Nets allow the 13th most assists to the power forward position. I wouldn't feel overly confident in taking his assist prop at 5.5. Rebound-wise, the Nets are right in the middle. They're on the 15th most rebounds in the league. He was rebounding extremely well until that Cleveland game where he only had one rebound. Now, prior to that game, because I looked into it, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Ben Simmons, he's been getting triple doubles against the Cleveland Cavaliers for a long time. He's been racking up the stats. Difficult matchup for him. Didn't get many rebounds at all. So the line didn't move. It's still at 6.5, though, despite that slow game. Look, I'd probably lean to the over, but if you're going to bet on someone who's only going to play 15 to 20 minutes a game, you better be confident, and I'm not. So I'm going to have to pass on Ben Simmons. That last game was a scare. Nick Claxton, let's have a look at his points and rebounds prop. In terms of points, the San Antonio Spurs allow the second most points to centers on the season. He's covered this line of 11.5 in 5 of his last 10 games. Last matchup against the Spurs, he scored 15 points. Now, I do love this player, Nick Claxton overs. And the reason why I love it is because a lot of these centers, when they come up against Wemby, they grow an extra foot. They're probably still a lot shorter than Wemby is, but they tend to put on a show against him. They come prepared and they start banging on him. So I do like this for Nick Claxton, over 11.5. He did it in his last game against the Spurs. He's done it in only 5 of his last 10. Looking at his shot attempts, he's only taking 9 to 10 per game, but he is shooting at 60% from the field. Doesn't get to the free throw line that much. But what's this insight? Nick Claxton has failed to exceed 12.5 points in 5 of his last 6 games at home. He's averaging 10.5. So I think despite the Wemby matchup is real, motivation cannot be tracked by a chart. I think there's a good chance that he can cover this 11.5 point line. So definitely a strong lean for me. Whoops, I forgot to look at his rebounds. Looking at his rebounds, his line set at 9.5. The Spurs are now the second most rebounds to centers as well. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. His last matchup against them, let's have a look, see what happens. He had 11 rebounds against them. So that's pretty juicy. So I think for Nick Claxton, what I'd be thinking is points and rebounds. So as we can see here on the right, points allowed and rebounds allowed quite well against the Spurs. He scored 26. He had 26 points and rebounds in their last matchup, 15 and 11. In his last 10, he's only covered this in 4 of the last 10, but I think Nick Claxton can get after it on this one. Cam Thomas is a gun for hire. If anybody needs a shooter, this is your man. His line's at 22.5 points. The Spurs allow the 9th most points to shooting guards. He's gone under this in 3 consecutive games, though, and he's covered in 5 of his last 10. We're going to see whether he played in that last game. He did. Against the Spurs last time, he scored 15 points. He played 29.9 minutes. Looking at his last 10 games, he's averaging 32.4 minutes, so slightly higher than what he played last time against the Spurs. But he's trending down at the moment, and it's not because he's not shooting the ball. 21, 16, and 18 points in his last 3 games. I mean, shot attempts, what I'm talking about, not points. But he's only shot 19, 38, and 33% from the field. So he's taking the shots, he's just not making them. So if you put in the fact that he's got a good matchup, he's still going to take the shots, or you're really relying on his field goal percentage, I think chances are he goes over in this game. So I wouldn't back the under of Cam Thomas because the activity is definitely still there. Mikal Bridges, let's have a look at this fella. Line's at 23.5. The Spurs allow the 9th fewest points to small forwards. Now, Bridges covered this line in 5 of his last 10. He didn't play in that last game against the Spurs, so this is all we really have to run off. He's got a difficult matchup, inconsistent recent form. I'm not saying he goes over. I just wouldn't feel confident backing him for anything. Looking at his assists, his line's at 3.5, and he's covered this in 7 of his last 10. He's got a good matchup. The Spurs allow the 9th most assists to small forwards, so over 3.5. Definitely don't mind that for Bridges in this one. Let's do a quick little dive to see how he performs in just home games. In home games, he's covered in 6 of his last 10. So it should be a high-scoring game. The Spurs, obviously not great defensively. And the Brooklyn Nets are not going to want to slow things down, especially with Wemby in the middle. So I think there's a good chance for him to get some assists in this one. Cam Johnson is out. He's a good link man, so it depends on whether they're going to find another shooter to sit in the corner. Rebound-wise, I would have bet on his rebound prop. He's not known for that. His line's at 4.5. He's covered in 4 of his last 10. The matchup is decent, but we've seen in his previous form that there's nothing real confident to rely on there. You'd just be guessing, to be honest. Who else is there in this game? Anyone else from the Brooklyn Nets that I'd be interested in looking at? No, there is not. Let's jump into the next one. Looking at the Chicago Bulls versus the Orlando Magic in this one. Let's take a look at Vucevic first, but before we look at him, let's talk through some injuries. Alex Caruso is a game time decision. Kobe White is a game time decision as well. So the two notable ones to look out for. Let's have a look at Nikola Vucevic though. Points wise, his line's at 18.5. He's covered this in 4 consecutive games and he's covered in 7 of his last 10. In terms of his matchup, the Orlando Magic allow the 11th fewest points to centers. If you've been living under a rock or you're new to basketball, Nikola Vucevic used to play for the Orlando Magic and he was their best player at one point in time. Looking at his head-to-head matchups against them, though, he's gone under in 3 straight. So that doesn't give me much confidence at all. Looking at his rebound prop, though, where's his rebound prop? Here she is. His rebound prop's at 10.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. The Magic allow the 11th fewest rebounds to centers. We can see that matching up against them, he's gone under in his last 2. Prior to that, he did rebound quite well. So I'm not loving that. Assist-wise, his line's at 3.5. Magic allow the 11th fewest assists to centers. So he's covered this in 3 of his last 10 games. And against the Magic, yeah, it's a little bit inconsistent. Did have 6 assists in their last matchup, but nothing from Vucevic for me. Having a look at DeMar DeRozan in this one. Whether he's a 3, I'm going to base his rankings off a 3 if you know how he plays. His line's at 23.5. He's covered that in 3 straight and in 6 of his last 10 games. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in his last 2 games against the Orlando Magic, who allow the 16th most points to small forwards. Assist-wise, his line is at 4.5. The Magic allow the 10th fewest assists to small forwards. He's covered this in 2 of his last 4 against them. And looking at his last 10 games, he's covered this at a 70% hit rate, 7 of his last 10. But the Magic are a difficult team to play against. Defensively, they're quite strong. So I don't think it'll be as easy as some of his previous matchups. Having a look at Kobe White. So he's a game time decision. So we'll see if he plays. But if he does, at least you're going to be armed with all the information that you need. His line's at 21.5. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10. The Orlando Magic allow the 9th fewest points to point guards. So possible difficult matchup. These are his games against Orlando. 0-0, 12-5, and 4. So that last game against the Magic was this season. And these 2 games were this season. Actually, they were both played in November. In those games, he played 32 and 29 minutes. So he definitely had the minutes there, but he only took 10 and 6 shots. So difficult one there for Kobe White. His recent form's great, but he struggled against the Magic in the past. Looking at his assist prop, his line is at 5.5, and he's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. The Magic allow the 3rd fewest assists to point guards on the season, though, and he's struggled against them in the past, too. All right, Kobe White rebounds. So he's covered his line of 4.5 in 9 of his last 10 games. Difficult matchup. The Magic allow the 2nd fewest rebounds to point guards this season. So his recent form has been great, though. He has struggled in his matchups against the Magic, though, in all areas. So difficult one. If you can figure out a reason why you shouldn't bet him outside of the head-to-head matchups, take the under. But his recent form is excellent. Let's jump into some Magic players. Let's have a look at Paolo Banchero first. His points line is at 23.5. In terms of points allowed to power forwards, the Chicago Bulls allow the 6th most points to power forwards. He's only covered this line in 4 of his last 10 games, though. Head-to-head matchups against the Bulls, he's struggled. 9, 22, 17, and 13. So the matchup is good, but his form against the Bulls isn't, and his recent form's a little bit average at the moment. So Banchero, points beware. Taking a look at his assists, he has been passing the ball extremely well. Look at that. He's covered in 9 of his last 10. The Bulls allowed the 10th most assists to power forwards on the season, so the matchup's not too bad. In terms of how he's played against them in the past, he's gone under in every single game. But this recent stretch where he's the offensive creator, the conductor out there, he's been playing excellent in that role. At 5.5, I'm a little bit hesitant. But at 4.5, pay a little bit of juice. I definitely take that. But yeah, a little bit cautious around his assists at the moment. But look, the matchup is good. It's going to be a slower paced game, though. Both teams play quite slow. But I can definitely see Banchero going the over on his assists. Looking at his rebounds prop, he's got a great matchup here. The Bulls allow the most rebounds to power forwards, but Banchero is inconsistent as hell when it comes to his boards. His line's at 7.5, and he's hit this in 4 of his last 10. Last 4 games against the Chicago Bulls, he's gone over in the last 2. So rebounded well against them in the past. The matchup is great. It's just the work in the last. It's pretty much all season. If you look at his graph, it looks like this. So I wouldn't be too confident on that. Probably the assist is probably the player I like the most from Banchero, and that's purely because of his recent form. Jumping into Franz Wagner. His point line's at 20.5. He's covered this in 3 of his last 10 games. The Bulls are mid-tier when it comes to the matchup, so it's not good nor bad. In head-to-head matchups, he scored 21 points the last time they played, but he's gone under in the 4 games prior to that. So not getting a strong feeling about his points prop. Looking at his assists, so he and Paolo Banchero have been passing the ball quite well. His assist props at 3.5. It's about minus 145, so it's a little bit juiced, but he's covered in 7 of his last 10, and the Chicago Bulls allow the 6th most assists to small forwards this season. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 straight against the Bulls, though. So be wary of that, but his recent form is great, and the matchup does suit. His rebound props at 4.5. The Bulls allow the 11th fewest rebounds to small forwards. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, but he's gone under in all his games against the Chicago Bulls. So I don't like that for France. Let's have a look at Wendell Carter Jr. So his point line's at 11.5. He's covered in 5 of his last 10. The Bulls allow the 9th fewest points to centers on the season. He has scored well against them in the past. He scored 15 points in his last matchup against the Bulls. Rebound-wise, 5 and 8 in his last 3 against them. And in his last 10 games, he's only covered this in 5 of his last 10. He's gone under in 3 straight. So I'm not feeling Wendell in this one. Jalen Suggs. I wonder how he's been going. Points-wise, his line's at 11.5. He's covered this in 2 of his last 10 games. The Orlando Magic allow the 8th fewest points to shooting guards. And Jalen Suggs has gone under this line in 3 straight games against the Orlando Magic. So I'd definitely be leaning the under here for Jalen Suggs. He's only hit this line at 44% of the year. His recent form's not great. He's got covering in only 2 of his last 10. So the Magic is, I wouldn't say they're deep, but they've got more players in their lineup, and they're going deeper into their bench, meaning less opportunities for players like Suggs. He's playing 27 minutes per game, and he's attempting 8 shot attempts on average. He's only shooting 31% from downtown, though. Jumping into the Philadelphia 76ers and the Washington Wizards. So we've got limited markets at the moment. I'm sure there's a lot of game time decisions. So we'll go into Tyus Jones first, but before we do that, let's check who's a game time decision. Embiid is out. So we've got Maxey, D'Anthony Melton, and Nicholas Batum, all game time decisions for the 76ers. And for the Wizards, Marvin Bagley, Patrick Baldwin, Rashawn Holmes, Isaiah Livers, all game time decisions. So limited markets at the moment, but let's go through the markets that are available, starting with Tyus Jones from the Washington Wizards. His points props at 12.5. He just scored 17 points against the Boston Celtics. His line was 11.5 in that game. The Philadelphia 76ers, 4th in terms of points allowed to Washington. So difficult matchup. They allow the 4th fewest points to point guards. Head-to-head matchup, scored 9 points in their most recent matchup. Prior to that, 20 and 12. Assist-wise, his line's at 7.5. The 76ers allow the 11th fewest assists to point guards. He's covered this line in 7 of his last 10. And I said it in my last video about this guy. Just take him for 10 points and 6 assists, and he did that against Boston today. He's covered 6 assists in probably 11 or 15 games in a row now. So don't mind the assists. I know the matchup's a little bit difficult, but at the pace that the Wizards play at, the assists are going to come. So I don't mind 6 assists for Tyus Jones. Keeping a mental note for that for all of my parlays. Kyle Kuzma, let's take a look at him. So his points line's at 22.5. The Philadelphia 76ers allow the 12th fewest points to power forwards. He's covered this line in 4 of his last 10 games. And against Philadelphia, he's covered this in 1 of his last 7. So points-wise for Kuzma, I'm not feeling that. But assists and rebounds, maybe I can fuck with. Assists, his line's at 4.5. The 76ers are mid-tier in terms of assists allowed to power forwards. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. And in head-to-head matchups, he's only covered that in 1 of his last 7. So I'm not feeling that one either. Let's check out his rebounds. He's propped at 8.5, which is so high. Jesus. Matchup is good, though. The 76ers allow the 6th most rebounds to power forwards. And we just saw Jalen Johnson up and tear them up in terms of getting some boards. I think Jalen Johnson had like 11 or 12 rebounds. So the matchup is good, but Kyle Kuzma has not been. He's covered in 3 of his last 10. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered in 2 of his last 7. But he had 9 rebounds covering this line in his last matchup against Philly. But based off what I'm seeing here, I'm not feeling Kyle Kuzma today. Well, most days I don't feel him anyway. So let's check out Denny Advia. His points props at 15.5. In terms of how Philly defends small forwards, they allow the eighth fewest points to small forwards. He's covered this in 3 of his last 10 games. And against Philly, he's covered in 1 of his last 7. So matchup is difficult. His recent form's a bit patchy, but he struggled against them. Probably lean to the under in this one. Assist wise for him, his line's at 4.5. He's covered that in 3 of his last 10, and the 76ers allow the 5th fewest assists to small forward. So leaning the under, head to head matchups though, 2 of his last 7 he's gone over. In the games he's gone over, he's absolutely made it rain though. So that's a bit interesting. And checking out his rebounds prop, his line's at 8.5, just like Kuzma's. He's covered this in 1 of his last 10 games. He had 11 rebounds against Boston. The matchup is good, with the 76ers allowing the 8th most rebounds to small forwards. But, that's when Joel Embiid is playing. It's a different story now. I feel like whoever's playing center will probably get a lot more rebounds in this game. So, Denny Advia, see you later. Jordan Poole, he just came back with vengeance against the Boston Celtics. He smoked them. I think he had 19 points. He had 19 points, but I swear I felt like that was early in the third quarter. He had 19 points. He didn't score much after that. But nevertheless, he's covered this line in 3 of his last 10. In terms of matchup, Philly are right in the middle. 15th in points allowed to shooting guards. And head-to-head matchups, this is the main one that matters. Actually, both of these games were this season. Back-to-back, they were very close games. So 23, 23, and 11 against the Philadelphia 76ers. But I'm not feeling that. If I was ever going to play a Jordan Poole prop, it would be his assists. This is why. So his last 4 has been passing the ball quite well, 10, 7, 5, and 5. The 76ers allow the 7th most assists to shooting guards on the season. Jordan Poole's going to get minutes. He's going to get his usage rate. It just comes down to whether he's going to do something with it. And the 76ers on a back-to-back, well, both teams are, but I don't mind this. Assist for Jordan Poole, over 3.5. Do your research. Check his potential assists. His minutes are there sometimes. Played 37 minutes against Boston today, but I think he had 4 assists in the first quarter. So can be a difficult man to bet on, but I don't mind it. Assist prop for Jordan Poole. Tyrese Maxey, here's a game time decision. His line, if he does play, is at 31.5, though. He's only hit that in 2 of his last 10. Even if you look at his last 20 games, he's only hit this 5 times, 5 of his last 20 games. Matchup-wise, though, the Washington Wizards allow the 13th most points to point guards. Head-to-head matchups, Maxey's gone under in 5 of the 6 games. So, look, until Embiid comes back, I'll be leaning the under most nights for Tyrese Maxey anyway. Assist-wise, he's got 11, 7, and 6 in his last 3 games against the Washington Wizards. In his last 10, he's covered this 5 times. The Wizards do allow the 3rd most assists to point guards on the season. I think just fading his points prop, probably my favorite Tyrese Maxey play, 31.5. You're crazy. Jumping into the Memphis Grizzlies versus the Charlotte Hornets. Vince Williams, we'll look at him because he's been killing it quite well lately. Firstly, let's look at the injuries. No new injuries for the Grizzlies. We know Derrick Rose is a game-time decision. They got Utah now, his game-time decision as well, same as Zaire Williams. LaMelo Ball might make a return, so his game time. Bertans, Seth Curry, Kyle Lowry, Trey Mann, all game time decisions. So they got Grant Williams too as a game time decision. So look, probably best to stay away from this game until you know who the hell's playing. But let me go through the actual props and maybe we can find some juice here. Vince Williams, his points line's at 14.5. The Charlotte Hornets allow the most points to small forwards on the season. He's covered this line in 6 of his last 10, which is really good. Head-to-head matchups, I'm not too worried about. He's in a starting role now. I'd forget about all the other matchups he's had against them in the past because he's in a new role. He's playing a lot more minutes and he's getting these opportunities. So the matchup is really good. He's going to get his shots. He plays 34 minutes per game. He's averaging 10.8 shot attempts per game. He's shooting them at 52%. And looking at this, look, 10 points, probably great for your parlays if you like to play it safe. But even looking at his over 14.5, I don't mind that. But this guy's capable of filling up the stat sheet in other ways. So we'll go through his assists, go through his rebounds, and see which is the best play. So in terms of small forwards, the Charlotte Hornets allow the most assists to small forwards as well. He killed it in his last game with 8 assists. He's covered this line in 6 of his last 10. His line's at 3.5. So I like that. In terms of rebounds, his line's at 7.5. The Charlotte Hornets allowed the 7th most rebounds to small forwards, and he's only covered this line in 3 of his last 10 games. Can fill up the stat sheet, but that line of 7.5 seems a bit high to me. So if we look at just points and assists, that's what I do like for this guy. He's covered that in 7 of his last 10 games. He's going to get his opportunities. The matchup is perfect, with the Hornets being the worst team for points and assists allowed to small forwards. Vince Williams, points and assists, 18.5. I don't mind that. Look, on his day, he's capable of covering that in points alone. So making a mental note for Vince Williams. Jumping into Jaren Jackson Jr. in this one. His points line is 26.5. In terms of his matchup, the Charlotte Hornets allow the 11th fewest points to power forwards on the season. Now, he's covered this line in 5 of his last 10 games. Last game against the Charlotte Hornets, he only scored 17 points, and Memphis won that game by a shit ton. 24-point win for Memphis, and he only scored 17 points in that one. The matchup, somewhat difficult, but the Charlotte Hornets, we don't know who's going to play, so we don't know how difficult that matchup is actually going to be. So, I don't know. At the same time, 26.5, it seems about right. Don't get me wrong. I just wouldn't be confident taking Jaren Jackson Jr. His assist prop line's at 2.5. He's covered in 6 of his last 10, and the Hornets allow the 11th most assists to power forwards. Looking at his rebound prop, it's at 5.5. He's only covered in 3 of his last 10, and the Charlotte Hornets allow the 4th fewest rebounds to power forwards. And that's because they play a small 4, really. Miles Bridges most of the time. If he's going to take a lot of shots, Jaren Jackson probably won't get the chances to get rebounds in this one. So I don't mind an under in Jaren Jackson's rebound prop. Let me say that. I want to look at his blocks and his steals, more so his blocks. Defensive of the player of the year, his line's at 1.5. He's only covered this in 2 of his last 10 games. That's not very impressive, I must say. In terms of his steals, his line for that is at 1.5 plus money, and he's only covered that in 3 of his last 10. So, yeah, I'm not the only prop there for Jaren Jackson Jr. Would probably be under in his rebounds, to be honest. Let's have a look at Brandon Miller, though. His points line is at 23.5. The Charlotte Hornets allow the 5th fewest points. Sorry, not the Charlotte Hornets. The Memphis Grizzlies allow the 5th fewest points to shooting guards. I could think Vince Williams will probably do the job of picking up Brandon Miller, and Vince Williams is a very good defender. Now, Brandon's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games. Only scored 16 against Milwaukee. He had a good matchup in that one, and only 20 against the Raptors, and he had a good matchup in that one too. So he's going to get the ball a lot. And whether he scores as many points, I do not know. So I would confidently take his under either. But assists, I don't want to look at his assists. He doesn't do much of that. Rebound-wise, these numbers look good, but if you watch him play, a lot of these rebounds just fall in his lap. He's not a great rebounder, I would say. So maybe if you're looking at a PRA, I'd probably take his under, to be honest, because he doesn't create much on offense to get assists, and rebounding, he doesn't rebound well. So all of these games where he's gone over, it's clearly driven by his points. 33, 35, 28, 29. His PRA is driven by his points. If you have a look at his rebounds plus assists, he's only covered that in 4 of his last 10. So, yeah, not feeling Brandon Miller in this matchup against the stingy Memphis Grizzlies. One player that I do like, though, is Nick Richards. So it's mainly his rebound prop. So let's jump straight to that. His rebound prop, what are we getting at? 10.5. It opened at 10. It moved to 10.5 already. You can see he's hit this line in 3 of his last 10, but the matchup is excellent. For one, Memphis allows the 3rd most rebounds, full stop. For centers, they allow the 2nd most rebounds. So it's a great matchup for Nick Richards in this one. He's only covered in 3 of his last 10, though. Last 2 matchups against Memphis, he only had 2 rebounds and 9 rebounds. But look at the minutes, 18 minutes and less than 5 minutes. So the game where he got 9 rebounds, he only played 18 minutes. Over his last 10 games, he's playing 30 minutes per game. So it says here that Nick Richards has failed to exceed 10.5 rebounds in 5 straight home games. I don't care, because Nick Richards has a great matchup today. I'm just checking to see in these last 10 games who he would have had a great matchup with as well. OKC would have had a great matchup in terms of rebounds allowed, because Chet ain't getting them boards. Indiana's a difficult matchup. Lakers is difficult. The Raptors, they give up points, not rebounds to centers. The Bulls, that's a difficult one. The Knicks, that's a hard one too. The Rockets is mid. Detroit is a difficult matchup. Utah's an average matchup. So, yeah, Milwaukee's an easier matchup, but it's not going to be as easy as this one. So, yeah, Nick Richard to get boards, I can get down with that. So, take a mental note of that. So, what do I like so far? Nick Richard's boards, Vince Williams points and assists is what I'm thinking. Miles Bridges, his point line's at 26.5. The Grizz allow the 14th fewest points to power forwards. He had 2 games of 40 plus, then he shit the bed against the Milwaukee Bucks with 11, but that was a difficult matchup for him. Look, Miles Bridges is going to take a lot of shots. Look at his shot attempts. He's going to take a lot of shots. You just don't know whether he's going to make them. Jaren Jackson Jr. might be the one picking up in this one. So, yeah. Look, I'm not feeling Miles Bridges, to be honest, but I wouldn't say to take his under. But we've got 2 more games to get through, and then I'll be on my way. Let's talk about the Indiana Pacers versus the New York Knicks. Jalen Johnson. Jesus. Jalen Brunson. Game time decision, I'm sure. He missed the last one. But there's a lot of players who are game time decisions on this one. So I would not be making any bets on this game until I go through the lines and I find something juicy. But for now, smartest thing to do is hold off. Halliburton's game time, Doug McDermott, and Jalen Smith. For the Knicks, OG is out. Hardenstein is now out. And we know that Julius Randle and Mitchell Robinson are already out. So Brunson, Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, all game time decisions at the minute. So if Brunson does play, at least you'll get the analysis already done for you. So his points line at the moment, 30.5 if he plays. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games. In terms of the matchup, it's right in the middle. The Indiana Pacers allow the 15th fewest points to point guards. They also give him a difficult time passing the ball, I believe. Yes. The 3rd fewest assists to point guards as well. So his line's at 6.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10, though. We have seen lines of 7.5 for Jalen Brunson, but obviously it's been moved down due to the matchup. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone under his assist prop in every single game against the Indiana Pacers. Points-wise, scored 40 points in their last matchup against the Pacers. So he scored decently against them. So Brunson for 25, most definitely for your parlays. To 30.5, I'm not too sure. Let's look at Spicy P, Pascal Siakam. His points line's at 19.5. On the season, the Knicks allow the 12th most points to power forwards. He's covered this points line in 6 of his last 10 games. Matchup against the Knicks, he scored 18 points, but I think that might have been one of his earlier games against them. So still adjusting to his new team, but yeah, I'm not loving the 19.5, but you can see he's been quite consistent. So Pascal for 15, fuck yeah, why not? Looking at his assists though, his line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 7 of his last 10. And in terms of the matchup, the Knicks are mid. I'm not going to be playing this because I actually took him for over 3.5 assists against the Warriors. And against the Warriors, he had a good matchup and he didn't get it done. Not to say that he can't get it done. I just have some sick feelings in my stomach and I'm holding on to them. Rebound-wise for Pascal, though, his line is at 16.5. The Knicks allow the fewest rebounds to power forwards on the season. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10, and he had 7 rebounds, covering this line in his last matchup. I wouldn't be too worried about the Knicks allowing the least rebounds to power forwards on the season, though, because Mitchell Robinson is out, Hardenstein is out, and Julius Randle is out. They're the 3 best rebounders by far. Who's the next best rebounder they have? Josh Hart, Precious Achua, perhaps. But yeah, I wouldn't be too afraid of that stat. Pascal rebounds. Look, I'd definitely take him for 6, maybe for parlays, but 15.6 rebounds is all I'm thinking there for Pascal Siakam. Let's look at Aaron Naismith Jr. With the right matchup, this guy can be a moneymaker. Against the Knicks, they allow the 9th most points to small forwards. Now, Naismith has covered this line in 8 of his last 10 games. Last matchup against the Knicks, he scored 17. Prior to that, 25, 14, 12, and 23. So he loves playing the Knicks. The matchup is pretty decent. Not the easiest one on the slate, but a good matchup, and his recent form is there. So, look, I'm getting a little bit aroused by this. So Aaron Naismith, I do like his over in points. What he also does well is he gets rebounds. Looking at his rebound prop, it's at 4.5. The Knicks allow the 9th most rebounds to power small forwards. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10 games. Looking at head-to-head matchups, 6 rebounds in his last game against the Knicks, 6, 1, 5, 4, and 10. So it's a pretty good line, to be honest. If you want to look at just points and rebounds, let's have a look at that. Points and rebounds for Naismith. The line's at 16.5. He's covered this in 8 of his last 10 games. And in a lot of those games, he's covered it by a long margin. And in head-to-head matchups against the Knicks, he's covered this in 4 of his last 5. So very decent one there. Aaron Naismith, points and rebounds. Let's have a look at Miles Turner, points and rebounds. Firstly, his points prop. Lines at 16.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10. The Knicks allow the 4th fewest points to centers on the season, but they're missing 2 of their starting center, then their backup center. They're missing them both. So head-to-head matchups. He only scored 5 points in their last matchup, 28 prior to that. So a little bit inconsistent. Rebound-wise, the matchup's going to show that it's somewhat difficult, but again, they're missing a lot of players. He's covered this line in 3 of his last 10, and he had 4 rebounds in his last matchup against the Knicks. So I'm not feeling Miles Turner, I must say. Tyrese Halliburton, if he does play, let's see what he's got. His points props at 17.5. The Knicks allow the 2nd fewest points to point guards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 of 4. In his last 10, he's gone under in 8 of his last 10. So, yeah, difficult matchup. Recent form's not great. Possible minutes restriction as well for Halliburton. He's playing a little bit more minutes than he once was, but shot attempts not there at the moment. So, yeah, I'm leaning to the under in his points. Looking at his assists, though, the line's at 8.5. The Knicks allow the 14th fewest assists to point guards, right in the middle of the pack. He's covered this line in 4 of his last 10 against the Knicks. Had 5 assists in that last matchup, 23 assists in the matchup prior to that. My God. So, yeah, I'm not too sure about this one. To be honest, I'm just not going to bet on Tyrese Halliburton props. Well, he might not play for one, so it's a very easy comment for me to make, but there's nothing getting me aroused about Halliburton right now. At the moment, my favorite ones, probably Siakam 15 and 6, Naismith over in points and rebounds. I don't mind those picks. Let's jump into the last available game. It's the Phoenix Suns versus the Golden State Warriors. So I want to kick it off with Kevin Durant first. Before we get to him, let's talk through any possible injuries. Bradley Beal's a game time decision. Chris Paul is still out. Other than that, everyone else is suited up to play. Let's go. All right, KD. Props at 25.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 games. The Warriors allow the 13th most points to power forwards. Head-to-head matchups. He scored 32 in his last matchup against the Golden State Warriors. That was in November, so he absolutely smoked them. In his last 10, we're starting to see the old KD. Starting to get a lot more buckets, get more aggressive. Not minutes that I was worried about, it's shot attempts. For a long time, he was shooting only 10 to 15 times per game. And he's shot over 20 times in 3 of his last 4 games. So KD, I don't mind his points prop. He's feeling himself these days. I like that. Assist-wise, his line's at 4.5. The Warriors allow the 3rd most assists to power forwards on the season. He's hit this line in 8 of his last 10, and he hasn't passed the ball that well against the Warriors. So that's one to factor in, but his recent form is great. Rebound-wise, his line's at 6.5. The Warriors allow the 4th most rebounds to power forwards. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10, and he's covered it in both of his last games against the Golden State Warriors. So given that he's got a good matchup with assists, I know his form's a bit how you going. Maybe a possible PRA play here for Kevin Durant could be on the table. His PRA, we're looking at his 36.5. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games. Against the Warriors, he covered it in his last one with 42. Prior to that, he had 32. So given he hasn't passed the ball that well against the Warriors, maybe just a points and rebounds prop. Maybe that looks a little bit better. That's also 5 from 10. But he's got, it's also 1 from 2 against the Warriors. So, yeah, I'm not too sure. It's something I need to research a little bit further on and think about. Rebounds is probably the best matchup for him. His recent form for rebounds a bit how you going, but I don't hate it at all. KD. Let's take a look at D-Book. Line's at 28.5. He's covered this in 4 of his last 10 games. In terms of matchup, the Warriors allow the 3rd most points to point guards. Head-to-head matchups, he's done quite well. He's covered in 4 of his last 6 games against the Golden State Warriors. So Devin Booker just missed their last game, so I don't know if there's a minutes restriction and what the extent of his injury is, so I encourage you to look into that. Assist-wise, his line's at 5.5. The Warriors allowed the 11th most assists to point guards. He's hit this in 4 of his last 10, and he's hit this in 5 of his last 6 games against the Golden State Warriors. Looking at his rebounds, his line's at 4.5. The Golden State Warriors allow the 16th fewest rebounds to point guards. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10 and only 2 of his last 6 against the Warriors. So I think with Devin Booker, you're really just looking at points and assists. His points and assists have been very inconsistent lately, but against the Warriors in the past, he's absolutely crushed it. So I'll leave it up to you to decide whether you make a play on Devin Booker. Use of Nurkic. I've liked betting on this guy so far this year. Let's take a look and see how his lines are looking. Points wise, his props at 12.5. He's hit this in 4 of his last 5, but 4 of his last 10. In terms of points allowed to centers, the Golden State Warriors allow the 10th most points to centers on the season. In head-to-head matchups, he's done quite well, 17, 9, and 14 for use of Nurkic. This 5-game stretch that he's been on has been pretty decent. His minutes have been good. His shot attempts have been up there. Check out the shot attempts. Last 5 games, he's really putting some shots up. So not minding Nurkic for this one. The Warriors don't have someone to really contain him inside. So his points prop looks pretty decent. Looking at his assists, lines at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10. The Warriors allow the 3rd most assists to centers on the season. Head-to-head matchups, he had 7 assists in his last game against the Golden State Warriors. So I don't mind that at all. And then looking at his rebound prop, his line is 10.5. The Golden State Warriors, they allow the 11th fewest rebounds to centers on the season. He's hit this in 3 of his last 10. Had 13 rebounds against them last time, though. So probably less predictable. In terms of Nurkic, maybe a points and assist play could be on. He's hit that in 4 of his last 5 as well. Realistically, if you're just looking at one prop, I would say, yeah, no, actually, I like them both. Points and assists for Yusuf Nurkic, over 15.5. Why the fuck not? Let's go. Jumping into these Golden State Warriors, Steph Curry. Let's have a look at the chef. His line's at 27.5. He's hit this in 6 of his last 10 games. He just had 42 against the Pacers. The Phoenix Suns allow the 8th most points to point guards on the season. Head-to-head matchups, Steph Curry has struggled. He's only covered in 1 of his last 7, but he is on one right now. His recent form is pretty good. Looking at his assists, his line is at 4.5. He's hit this in 5 of his last 10, but he's gone under in 4 straight. The Phoenix Suns allow the 13th most assists to point guard, so the matchups ain't crazy. But he's hit this in 4 of his last 7 games against the Phoenix Suns. And then looking at his rebound prop, his line's at 3.5. He's hit this in 6 out of his last 10 games. The Phoenix Suns allow the 10th fewest rebounds to point guards. So he's rebounded quite well against them in the past, 5 of his last 7. But look, nothing about Steph Curry's jumping out to me on this one. Jonathan Kuminga, he's been playing quite well lately. Not when I bet on him, but he has been playing quite well lately. You can see his line's at 18.5. He's covered this in 7 of his last 10. These 3 games where he went under, I'm pretty sure I bet on him every single time. Fuck you, Jonathan Kuminga. In terms of the matchup, Phoenix Suns allow the 7th most points to power forwards on the season. His line at 18.5. It's actually come down, so I don't mind that. We're getting pretty close to it. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in every single game, but it's really been over the last couple of weeks. Jonathan Kuminga's seen a real uplift in his minutes and his shots. Last game against the Suns, he took 10 shots and he played 28 minutes. Looking at his last 10 games, check this out. He's playing 33.7 minutes and he's averaging 15.8 field goal attempts. So he's definitely taken more shots. I do like Jonathan Kuminga to go over in this one, but depending on what else I find in this game, he might just be added to a same game parlay, but I don't mind that. Looking at his assists, I know recently he's had a few games with some solid assist numbers. His line's at 2.5. Yep, I wasn't wrong. 5 straight games he's covered this line. The Suns allow the 8th fewest assists to power forwards. So Kuminga's been passing the ball quite well. Head-to-head matchups, I wouldn't put too much stock into that. Different role now. He's a different beast. So Jonathan Kuminga, assist form is pretty good. Looking at his rebounds, the line's at 5.5. The Suns allow the 7th fewest rebounds to power forwards. If Kuminga's going to be defending Kevin Durant, he's probably not going to get many boards at all. But he has covered in 7 out of his last 10, and he has rebounded well against the Phoenix Suns in the past. So, but yeah, my favorite player would probably be Jonathan Kuminga's points if we're just talking about him. Who else do we have on this team? Klay Thompson. My God, he still plays basketball, this guy. Line's at 16.5. The Phoenix Suns, 14th fewest points to shooting guards. He's covered this in 5 out of his last 10. Previous form, he's done well against the Suns, but Klay Thompson's not the same beast anymore, so I'd be a little bit hesitant to bet on him. Andrew Wiggins, man, I don't know what happened to this guy, but his line's at 10.5. He's probably in his physical prime right now, but he's not playing that way. He's covered in 7 out of his last 10, though. So with the right game, right opportunity, he can get work done. He's got a difficult matchup. The Suns allow the 4th fewest points to small forwards on the season. Against the Suns, he's hit this in 3 out of his last 6. But I believe his role was different back then, and his line would have been a lot higher. So that's not overly impressive for Andrew Wiggins. So I'm not a fan of that. So just doing a recap on this game, what am I thinking? Kuminga for some points, I don't mind. Kevin Durant, points and rebounds are pretty good. Devin Booker, I don't want to bet on him coming back from injury. And Yusuf Nurkic, his points and assists, they got me a little bit aroused too. So if you made it this far, I thank you, because that is a wrap on the preview of all the different player props. I'm not done quite yet, though, so stick around. I've got a little bit more for you. I've actually updated the tracker for all the props and the picks that I give out on YouTube. We've been slaying it lately, so I wanted to take you guys through a recap to talk about how things are going. Before we do the recap, though, I hope you like what I'm sharing all through Outlier. I made the switch to Outlier a few days ago, and I haven't had a losing day since. So a reminder for you guys that there is a 7-day free trial. The link for that is in the description box of this video. Check it out. Let me know what you think. But let's get straight into this recap. All right, so we're jumping into my bet analytics. Now, this is pretty much all the picks that I've given out on YouTube this season. So we're up to 39.53 units, which is, I wouldn't say it is amazing, but I'm pretty happy with it, I've got to be honest with you. Because looking at the year, we had very profitable months, but like a lot of people, January absolutely smoked me, lost 18 units that month. And then the start of February was pretty awful as well. At one point in Feb, I was down, I think, 12 or 13 units. Since we've made the switch to Outlier, we've had some very profitable days. This week alone, I'm up 7.7 units. Some games still pending, obviously, but it's been pretty good. Very decent, very happy with it. If we check the analyzer, firstly, I just want to filter through to, let's just look at February. February is going to capture my shit form and my good recent form. Looking at how February's going, we're up 8.15 units in the month of Feb. As you can see, we started here, had some dips. So that's about a 7-unit loss, down to 7 units, got it down to 7 units in Feb. And for us to get up to 8 units, which means there was a 15-unit swing in there. Looking at the analyzer to see what types of bets have been bringing it home for me. And to my surprise, same game multis or the same game parlays are up 13.85 units in February alone. On player props, we're minus 3.2 units. These multis, that's where I just grab a couple money line picks. Haven't done many single player value same game multis lately throughout the month of Feb, purely because I was starting to bleed money throughout January. So I pulled back on that. Same game multis, a lot of people can fuck with, and they've been going quite well. 12 and 12, so win 1 out of every 2. But obviously the odds on same game multis would be a lot higher. I can get them at $3, $4, $5. So we're up 13.8 units on multis alone. So I'm pretty pleased with that. And if you want to see my personal bankroll tracker, so this is how all my personal NBA bets plus the YouTube ones are looking. Up 101 units so far. But if you've been following a lot of, and you're in my Discord, a lot of the bets from the last 2 months that I do on the Discord, very much the same as YouTube. So they're very much aligned. But at the start of the season, I was going hard in the Discord in my own picks. So I'm personally up 101 units, but on the picks that I share on YouTube, we're up 39 units for the season, which is still pretty decent, 39.5. So hopefully we continue these winning ways. We've got a massive slate of games coming up. So hope you guys are practicing some bankroll management, making some informed decisions before you place your bets. Don't get too greedy with it. Don't put massive parlays on. Like it's probably a bit of fun, but long term, you're not going to win. But look, if you made it this far, I do appreciate you. A lot of time and effort goes into making these videos. So please like that button, sub to the channel, like the button. The fuck am I talking about? Please click the like button, sub to the channel if you haven't already. Drop me a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. If you have any requests, recommendations, I'm all ears. I read every single comment. Now let's go.
Sub to the channel because your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free. You don't even have to pay me.